Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of a Novel Review the Book podcast. My name is Seamus, and if this is your first time finding your way to my little corner of the internet, my little corner of YouTube, then thank you so much for clicking on. Thank you so much for trusting me to hopefully deliver a good episode. And if you're a returning listener, then thank you so much for coming back. I really appreciate you guys. Today, a bit of a fun episode. I'm doing the first of a 3-episode series, my top 30 books of the 20th century. I do have a few rules to how I've picked the books, which I'll get to in a second. But yeah, first, just how are we doing? I hope everyone is sitting there with a lovely cup of tea or coffee, or perhaps something stronger if you needed to get you through the day, through the working week, through the working nights. I hope we're all well. I hope, as always, we're reading fantastic books and the to-be-read pile is always growing and never-ending. It is a bit of a cloudy day here today in London. The sun has been poking through, and if it suddenly comes through and blinds me, that's, well, can't complain about the weather. So, yeah, let's get on with the episode. Okay, so as I said, today I'm doing books 30 to 21 of a 3-book series. The second episode will come out in a month's time. That'll be 20 to 19, 20 to 11, and then the following month will be 10 to 1. So my top books of the 20th century. I have placed a few rules, a few limitations upon myself. Once an author appears on the list, they cannot appear again. I just thought that was probably the best and fairest way to get a very nice even spread, because otherwise, when you're doing these lists, my top 5 books could easily be from a particular author or something like that, and just to avoid that clunkiness of, and we've got another book from such and such. Boring for you guys, boring for me to think about as well. It's always great to sort of sit down and do these episodes and sort of take stock to all the books you have read. So yeah. Also, the numbering of the lists, outside the top 10, they're in a rough order, but if something's in 28th, it could easily be 29th or 27th, so there is a bit of flexibility there. I am going to do an honorable mentions in the final episode just to cover my back in case I remember any books between now and then that probably should be featured on the list that I've forgotten about. So I'm just giving myself a little leeway there as well, because you do read a lot of books and you do kind of forget that you've read those books. Not necessarily because they're bad books, but just because you've forgotten that you read them. And also, finally, before I get to the list, I have summed up each book with 3 words, and I thought this was a nice way to do it, just sort of the 3 words that came to my mind when I remember these books, so that I don't spend the entire episode just going down rabbit holes of certain books and over-explaining too much about certain books. So 3 words to sort of sum those books up, and then I'll speak briefly about them as well, of course. So let's get underway. Book number 30. The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Armin. My 3 words: renewal, friendship, and weather. Really fantastic book, this. I actually listened to it probably 4 years ago now, maybe even a bit longer. Very briefly, it's about a few women that are living in London, and they're going through sort of a long winter and they want to escape, and they see an advert in the paper. This is in, I think it's like 1929, so when you still saw those kinds of things. They see an advert for a paper to rent a house in Italy. And these women decide to be quite independent for various reasons, and they band together, even though they don't really know each other, to go live in this house for a month. And it's incredible. It's a really nice book because it's just, it touches on so many wonderful things, but really what it just gives you this great sense of is childish wonder and excitement and adventure, and, just sort of escaping the everyday domesticity of a cold, wet, wintry London to the sunny Italian, to a sunny Italian house. And it's really nice. It's really uplifting for that. I listened to it in winter, and it really just gives you that sense of adventure, and it really makes you want to do something like that and to just sort of stretch out in that way, and sort of have enough money aside so that if these opportunities do arise, to just be able to seize them with both hands. So I really, really enjoyed that book. I could recommend a few other things, but I recommend it at least 30th. So book number 29. This is technically a short story, maybe even a very short novella, The Dead by James Joyce. It is the final story in the book of short stories, The Dubliners. James Joyce is an interesting one because I had to read The Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man for University, which I then reread probably 5 years after I finished university, and I didn't like it the second time. I didn't like it the first time. I thought I might have missed something and thought I might have just been too young to understand it. Reread it, didn't like it. Turned to the Dubliners because everyone says it's really nice. And it was really nice, but it wasn't, for me, I guess, life-changing in that sense. I wasn't like completely invested in every single story. I believe there's 12 stories, but then you got to the final story, The Dead, and everyone says this is the story. And it was incredible. I realized I've forgotten to say the 3 words. My 3 words: memory, epiphany, and love. It was incredible, and it's incredible to the point that I'm actually not going to say anything about it, because I think I came in with relatively low expectations. It's the final story of a book of short stories. I haven't also liked another novel by him, so I came in with quite low expectations, and I also came in knowing nothing about the story, and I think that was a huge factor as to why I loved it, because it was incredible on a storytelling aspect. It's obviously great writing. I'm a James Joyce. Despite everything, despite the fact that I'm not his biggest fan, I still think he's a fantastic writer. It's just not my cup of tea. But this story in particular was like a lot of fun. It was wicked. It was fantastic. So I'm actually not going to say anything more about that, because I think if you haven't read this, go in and read it. Read the Dubliners first. Read the other stories first. They don't relate, but I think they just sort of help to build this sort of worldview of what's going on at this particular point in time. So, The Dead. Book number 28, Franny and Zooey, or Franny and Zoe. I don't quite know how to pronounce it, but it's got a double O there in Zooey, by J.D. Salinger. My words: family, intellect, and existential. Now, this is another funny author for me, because I read Catcher in the Rye, and I didn't like that at all. I thought Holden Caulfield was just incredibly boring. I didn't really find him that fascinating a character. I spoke to a friend about this book and that character, the character of Holden. He said maybe because I read him quite late, I read him when I was probably 26, maybe even 27, that I probably just had missed the mark on reading a book about a 16-year-old boy. Tough to say, impossible to really say one way or the other. Just didn't like it and didn't think it was really worth all the hype. So I was actually quite wary to jump back into a Salinger book. But Franny and Zoe is fantastic. Family, intellect, and existential. I thought the interplay between the brother and the sister, Franny and Zoe, and then the mother as well in the background as this kind of like third main character, was really, really fascinating. And I really liked the relationship with the mother and how she navigates certain things that go on within the story herself, and how she presents herself. I thought it was really, really fascinating, and a really nice, honest portrayal of what family dynamics can be like. I really liked that. That one really took me by surprise. I didn't think I'd like that book that much, because I didn't think I liked Salinger that much, but now I'd happily read more Salinger. So, that was book 28. Book 27, Handmaid's Tale. Unfortunately still relevant. That's 3 words right there. Unfortunately still relevant. Still very relevant today. My 3 words: oppression, resistance, and survival. I feel like at this stage, this book almost speaks for itself. I had to read it at university, and the only bad thing about it was that I had 1 week to read it. And, at university, when you're reading a book a week for that particular class, you only really get 1 class to speak about it. And I think that was the biggest crime of all, was that, you don't spend 2 or 3 weeks at least going through a book like this, analyzing a book like this, because it's these kind of really big books that are, it was written in, the 80s? I think it was mid-80s by Margaret Atwood. And it's these kind of books that, they're still shockingly relevant today, and they're the kind of books you really want to tear apart and get to the crux and get to the foundation of, and understand what's going on in this story that's still so relevant today, and why is it still so relevant. So, fantastic book. I mean, like I said, I think it just speaks for itself at this stage. So, oppression, resistance, and survival. First words that came to my mind. So, Handmaid's Tale. 26, A Small Place by Jamacia Kincaid. I listened to this book as well, and my 3 words are comedic, colonization, and identity. Now, the combination of those 2 words there, comedic and colonization, might not sound like they go together, but I really liked the way Jamacia Kincaid told this story, because she utilizes comedy in such a wonderful way, where she clearly understands that you can't just, not necessarily attack, but point out the faults of people, because people often get quite defensive to their faults. You can't just point at someone and start a book or start a story or start criticizing someone by pointing at them and saying, this is what you're doing wrong. And the way she goes about it is she actually starts this story and she starts telling this story in a really comedic way that you as the reader and therefore the tourist in this story sort of, you can identify with the character because they're having fun and they're on holidays and you're enjoying yourself. And it's, it's a holiday, so who cares what's going on? And then sort of page by page, she kind of strips back and you sort of start to understand the truth of what's going on. And it's this way that she's utilized comedy, especially in the first part of the book, to disarm us. And it really highlights how comedy can disarm us and bring us to, shine attention on some pretty serious issues. So I really liked that book for what it does, I think comedically, for what it does literarily, and also the story it's telling as well is super important as well. But yeah, really just the first word that came to mind when I thought of this book was comedy and comedic, because it's just masterful the way she strips back us as the reader through comedy. So I really like that. Jamaica Kincaid, A Small Place. That was book number 26. 25, a book that I have done on the podcast, Moon Tiger, Warm, Spiraling, and Love. Second book on here where warm and weather is kind of, the Enchanted April. It's you can tell I've been living through a European winter here, a London winter. There's a particular period in this book where there's a love story going on during World War II and they're in Egypt, and you just get the really strong sense of the warmth going on, the beauty and the warmth and the love going on as well. And I mean, I won't actually say anything else about that just because there is a whole episode on it, probably like 20, maybe 25 episodes ago now. But go check that out. But Warm, Spiraling, and Love. And spiraling because there's the moon tiger, which is the name for, and I didn't know this, the name for those green coils that keep the flies away. They're apparently called a moon tiger, but it's just kind of like this seductive spiraling of smoke in Egypt when you're having a love affair in the middle of World War II, and it's that heightened sense of, I guess, passion because you don't know when you're going to see each other again, if you're going to see each other again. It feels like the world's ending, but you're just having this love affair in Egypt in the warmth, in the sun, and it's just beautiful for that. So, Warm, Spiraling, and Love. Book number 24, Stoner by John Williams. My 3 words, quiet, human, and simple. This is a book that seems to have just had a bit of a resurgence in the last few years, and it just sort of just seems to be growing, really, with every sort of passing moment, and everyone sort of starts to be paying more and more attention to it and understanding that it is actually like a really, really great book. I loved it. I listened to it actually probably back in 2020, 2021 maybe, and I thought the narration was absolutely fantastic as well and really paid homage to the nature of the story. And it's really just about this guy and he's kind of going through his relatively quiet, relatively mundane life by sort of, I guess, story standards, because naturally we tend to have stories focusing on the big action heroes or something like this. We're looking for interesting stories, but this is like a really quiet story about a guy more or less just going about his business, and it's incredibly beautiful. I mean, the language in this story is really just next level. I can sort of see why it maybe slipped out of the public's eye, because like I said, it's not this incredibly exciting story, which, is going to happen, unfortunately. Because it is a quieter story, but it's a quiet achiever, and what it achieves is a really fantastic thing. And it is just a highlight of how important literature is and how vital and important and wonderful literature is and can be. And, in the end, good literature is going to shine through and survive. So, another word could have been endurance for both the book and the character of Stoner as well. So, really enjoyed that. Book number 23. The Royal Game by Stefan Zweig. My 3 words, chess, obsession, and madness. This is fantastic. This is one of those really great novellas. This is for me, one of the top novellas. I haven't read, all the novellas, so don't shoot me for that. But I think it is a fantastic novella. There's also like a very small pocket of really great books about chess as well. And this is one of them. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. I think the analogy that you can read into in this story is absolutely fantastic. I think it works on so many different levels, and the main 2 levels are, if you just want to read a really great story about this battle of chess, it's there for you. But if you want to delve deeper and uncover and unmask sort of the analogy of this story and the politics of this story, the world play of this story, it's there for you as well. You know, if you just want a great story, you can read it. But if you want something that you can actually delve deeper into and understand sort of the wider socio-political element of the story, it is there as well. So I really loved it. I mean, I'm a big fan of Stefan Zweig. I think he does some really great work, and he's I'm going to say quite underrated because not many people talk about him. At least the people I'm talking to aren't talking about him. So what's that about? I don't know. I think he's really good, and the Royal Game is absolutely fantastic. Book number 22. I kind of wrestled with this one a bit, but I also can't deny that when I read it, I really, really loved it, and I didn't realize I was going to love it. And the book is The Prisoner of Azkaban by J.K. Rowling. Growing up, I didn't like this story, and there's an element of me that still doesn't like this story. And the element I don't like is the introduction of time travel. And I just think time travel stories are so difficult to navigate, and the introduction of time travel needs to be in a contained universe where that is the key thing. I don't think introducing time travel into book 3 of a 7-book series is smart, and I don't think it's smart to introduce it, use it, utilize it, and then pretty much never mention it again. And that's why I always hated it. And I would have always rated this probably my least favorite of the Harry Potter series as well. Then I reread the Harry Potter series last year for the podcast, and I can't deny it was a really great reading experience. I really enjoyed it. I really had great fun while reading this. It's definitely not my favorite Harry Potter, but since this is best books of the 20th century, not 21st, I think it's making the list at 22. I'm torn. There was another book that I'll say in my kind of my honorable mentions. I think that I think I could have maybe swapped them, but I didn't even say my 3 words: time, betrayal, and freedom. I also think it's the most useless of the Harry Potter books as well. Like, it's the one that adds the least to the progression of the story. Voldemort doesn't appear in this story. There's not a whole lot that actually happens, I think, in regards to progress of the overarching story. Yeah, this is the most useless of them. It introduces time travel, which I hate, but I just had so much fun reading it. And the last 90 pages are absolutely fantastic, and I can't deny that. And I can't deny the feelings I had while reading it that were, just pure enjoyment, pure fantasy escapism enjoyment. So it's appearing on the list at 22. I did wrestle with that one a fair bit though, so take away what you will. And lastly, number 21. So rounding out the list, we've had The Enchanted April, The Dead, Franny and Zooey, Handmaid's Tale, A Small Place, Moon Tiger, Stoner, The Royal Game, Prisoner of Azkaban, and now number 21. Another book that I just did for the podcast quite recently as well. Misery by Stephen King. I don't know why I paused there. Misery by Stephen King. This is an interesting one. I have a feeling I'm going to read a lot more Stephen King in my life, and I have a feeling that this is going to get replaced fairly quickly by other books by Stephen King. My 3 words were tense, horror, and psychological. But it was incredible to read. It was incredible to jump into this story. I've now read 2 Stephen King's, Carrie and Misery, and this was clearly better than Carrie. So yeah, I have a feeling that this is going to be replaced fairly quickly, but I also think it is a fantastic story as well. It's a great, beach read of a kind of story. Don't know if I'd want to read it on a beach actually, because it is quite a frightening story. It is, tense, horror, and psychological. But beach read in terms of it's just a really great story. To be fair, Stephen King, he does utilize the English language fairly well. I'd say there is a lot of there are a lot of things that go on within the story, the writing of the story itself, that I think were really wonderful. I've done an episode on it, so just go watch that episode. But yeah, tense, horror, and psychological. I thought the way he elucidates the psychological pressure in that story is really kind of frightening, and that sense of you think there's going to be a jump scare, even though she's not there. You know she's gone away, and the chance of her coming back unannounced is just not there. But there's that pressure that just builds through the story where you think she's just going to appear and frighten the crap out of you. So Misery by Stephen King is coming in at 21. I'm pretty happy with that list, to be quite honest. I think there's a good mix of stories there, a good mix of really great literature. I had a lot of fun doing this. The good thing about these kind of episodes is that it actually lightens the load, because I like to do a book a week, and sometimes when you're reading big books, the pressure can get to you. So an episode like this, or now 3 episodes like this over the next 3 months, really actually kind of releases the pressure a bit, and that you have that extra week to read that tiny amount of extra reading time to read the stories. And I also think it's just great to take stock and sort of reflect on the books you have read, because that's sort of half the fun of it, isn't it? Being able to look back and think about the books you have read. So that was my first of the 3 episodes, books 30 to 21. If you would like to put your list in the comments, or if you agree or disagree, please let me know. Feel free to play along. Feel free to think about your lists. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it, isn't it? I've done the list now. I'm not going to start revealing the next lot of books till the next month, so stay tuned for that. Well, here we are at the end of the episode. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you had some fun listening to the books and to the 3 words to sum them up. If you disagree, let me know. If you agree, let me know. If you want to put your books in the comments, please feel free to do so. But yeah, just time to end the episode. So I think thank you to you guys for listening right to the end, and I hope to see you next time. Cheers, guys.